Welcome to World Builders Anonymous. Kick that world building addiction and actually finish that novel with your hosts Vito and John.
But really tough.
I don't know how you manage that. I think our volume's a little bit hot.
A little bit hot.
Volume's a little bit hot.
A little bit hot. Hot
Just
pot
like
of coffee.
just like a me.
Okay, anyway.
Anyway. Okay. Shall we begin?
Welcome to World Builders Anonymous, everybody. It's a new year. Everyone's feeling great. We're excited about all the new things that we're going to be doing this year, both with the podcast and in our personal lives. But there's a lot of new stuff coming all around. It's just all around going to be a fantastic
It's crazy.
year. We're
It's
really
insane.
excited.
Everything's nuts.
Everything's awesome.
Whenever
Everything
we start one of these, I'm tempted to go like, "Hello once again, audience."
Oh my gosh, that's
when we
throwback.
left off.
How many of you know who Tobuscus is? Message us in the comments.
Post on Twitter.
Wait, we're not on YouTube.
If you remember. We are on YouTube.
Oh, we are on YouTube. That's right. We are on YouTube.
Thanks to my genius brain.
We're on all kinds of things. I'm surprised people listen to
Slash-
podcasts on YouTube, but apparently it happens. So
I do it.
Although I guess with YouTube
sometimes.
Red, maybe if people have that, you can listen to things without the video.
You know,
So maybe
no one
that's
has
a thing.
YouTube Red. What are you talking about?
That's true. Anyway, let's get to our topic for today. We're going to keep it kind of short and sweet today. Hold on.
Oh, Vito's taking a drink.
There we go. Nice.
There
Okay.
we go.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet, just the length of the beer that I have right here. Actually, when we play shows, for those of you who don't know, I've mentioned it before, but I'm a Irish fiddle player. At our gigs at pubs we play at, we often say that our glass of beer or whatever we're drinking is the set meter, so when that runs out, that's how you know the set's over, because we got to go and refill it. So you'll know that the podcast is over when you hear like a slurping sound at the end of my can of beer here. So
It's subtle. You got to listen
It's
for
really
it.
subtle, and then you'll be like, "Oh, it's time to go." Okay, here we go. Anyway,
Okay.
but yes, so we are gonna get ready for a whole new world of wondrous things, as Thumbelina would say. But this year, it's going to be a lot
Nice
of fun.
reference.
We are going to be kind of, not really starting over, but we're
Well,
kind of revamping. We are kind
I
of
am.
starting over in
I
a
am, for
way.
sure.
It's not so much starting over as rededicating
Yeah.
ourselves and kind of changing our approach a little bit, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of value, I think, in what we've done before. Maybe let's go back real quick and talk about where we've come so far with this process we've been on so far.
Sure.
Our goal
Sure.
with this podcast was originally, and still is, to finish our novels for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And specifically finish a first draft, because we've never really got to that point before.
That's the first goal, at least.
That's the first goal. Yes, the first step on our journey is to finish first draft, get something out that we can edit, polish, perfect, and then get out there later. So what we thought we would do at the beginning was try a very structured method of plotting, where we were going to hit these 27 basically beats, chapters kind of, but really more like beats, story
beats, yeah.
Yeah, in structuring our stories. The problem came...
Which we planned out ahead of time.
Yes, we planned
Like,
those out
we
ahead
have
of time. We
a
spent some time
outline
on
of them.
Yeah, and we tried to really avoid our world building, hence the name World Builders Anonymous. That's what's always sidetracked us in the past, is getting caught up in the world building and the, oh man, this is getting hard actually writing my chapters. Ooh, how does the magic system work kind of thing,
right.
you know? And we didn't so much get sidetracked with that this time. It was more, I think part of it, let me know if you agree with this, John. Part of it was we realized that wasn't necessarily the entire problem.
That's part of it.
Yes. So, for example, we had slightly different ideas for our stories this time around, but for me specifically, I was basing my story on a specific historical event, this rebellion in Sicily in the 13th century, and I think I prioritized that event and kind of that setting and the big world kind of implications of that event over the character's journey. And so when I sat down to write the beginning of the story, when none of that had happened yet, or when it's
You were kinda lost.
off in the distance, and I have to figure out what this character is actually doing in the present, I was kind of lost because I hadn't really thought about that very much. Like I
Yeah.
had my plot structure was very much like this event happens, then this event happens, then this event happens, and I hadn't really considered how the character would interact with those events or be part of them, or And maybe that's part of it too, is that I was basically leading this character by the nose through this series of events that he might have been like, well, wait, this isn't what I would do. I'm like, that's not me, or I don't know, it's something like that. I was prioritizing world and story structure, I guess, over the character and his journey, which is really ultimately what's going to keep you writing and what's going to keep people reading is the connection with your characters, not the coolness of the events in your story. That's just kind of an extra thing, I think.
Yeah,
which we kind of know already. We already knew that, but it's interesting that you can know something like that and yet still fall into the trap of and it's trap, I guess. I don't know. And still kind of fall prey to that same temptation to prioritize those things over the character himself or herself and kind of what they want and how the story is affecting them and how they're changing over the course of the story. And so, yeah, we can maybe talk a little bit about your side of things from your story and maybe how it might be similar or not similar.
Yeah, it's actually a bit different for mine, mostly because well, the big thing for me is I lost interest in my story. That was a big part of it. I continued to struggle to sit down to write, and when I did, it wasn't productive, and I kept thinking, like, what's going on? And I eventually landed that I just wasn't interested in writing my story anymore. And there are a few reasons for that. The first one, I think, is that I didn't, and again, you have more writing experience than I do when it comes to like fiction and stuff. And so I'm learning a lot of things for myself and the way I want to do things for the first time. And this is one of those things, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Firstly, I discovered that I need to leave some room in my story for me to discover things for myself, or else I get bored. Because I had the beats so planned out, all I had to focus on as far as the writing goes, I felt like, was smaller moments that I wasn't as interested in writing at the time. And
maybe hadn't planned beforehand, and so you don't really know how they're supposed to fit with the things you did plan.
Exactly. It was trying to kind of put a square block in a round hole or something, however the expression goes. I can't, close enough. I don't know words. And in addition to that, I had it right before I went into the square cube
that
thing.
really messed you up.
It really just destroyed my train of thought.
Connecting dots and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing was I discovered that I want to write a story about a character who is not quite as developed in the beginning of the story. This one had featured a main character that had already gained a lot of competency and a lot of experience up to this point in his life. And I felt like I was missing the stuff that had happened before. I felt like I wanted to know how his relationships with his current group of people evolved. I wanted to know what his training looked like. I wanted to know, how he dealt with things all the way up to this point in his life, because he was starting out from a very established place. And another consequence of that was he wasn't an everyman. He wasn't a character who I could explain the world to the reader through his eyes with, because he already knew it all.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you don't see how he got there. You just see like this finished product almost, and you're like, well, I guess that's interesting, but it's kind of static, I guess.
Right. And so I felt like anything I did to establish relationships was feeling bad, because logically speaking, he would have already known the people he was with. He would have already, had this information. And I know that there are ways around that, and there are things you can do to make that all flow. The thing, though, is that's not what I wanted to write, and that's what I found out for myself, is that I wanted to write the story of people learning everything.
You've expressed to me, too, that you kind of want to be a part of that discovery process.
Yes.
In the writing process itself, not in this sort of impersonal planning process beforehand, and then imputing that into the writing.
Right.
So I think for both of us, what this kind of translates to is I think we're both going to attempt to try something else, I guess, because this whole project that we're doing is to try different things and kind of come up with our own methods for writing, because it's such a personal thing. It's not like, Brandon Sanderson's method is going to work for us, or Patrick Rothfuss's method, which takes like 9 years, is going to work for us, or whatever. So we need to discover our own thing, and that's what this process is all about. So we're going to take some wrong turns sometimes, but what I was going to say is that I think we've both decided that we want to take a more discovery sort of approach. And it's still going to be a hybrid. There's still going to be some planning involved, as with all, planning versus improvisational methods, but we're going to err a little bit more on the improvisational side this time, which is what I've had the most success with in the past. When I first started writing when I was like 15 or 16, and I wrote that 250 word, part of a story. It wasn't even nearly
Page.
complete or anything. 250 page, yes.
I
got
wrote
so
a whole
far.
250 word book.
I did it.
I did it, Mom. Look.
But no, I would just make those up, and I remember actually just
Yeah.
remembering in this very moment that I totally forgot that I did this. I took a short story writing class when I was in community college back then, around that time actually, and that's probably what got me started with this. And I had to write short stories for that class, and I would always just kind of sit down the day before it was due and go, okay, here we go, shrink, and
Yep.
and that's what I
Yep.
had the most success with. So maybe I should try that again. I've learned so much over the years since then about writing processes and how I want to be able to write, because I want to be a plotter. I want to be able to be that person who comes up with this great, amazing story kind of from on high, puts the pieces together, and then weaves it, seamlessly together with the words later on. But that's not worked out for me so far. And part of it is the world building addiction, but I think part of it maybe is that that's just not how I naturally kind of flow with stories, maybe. And so I want to try that. And I think that's kind of what you expressed as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I don't consider abandoning the story I was working on as a total loss.
Because we've been
I
talking
learned
about,
a lot
like,
about
don't do that, just keep going, all that kind of stuff, and that's great. But you do have to know when something's not working and when to try something else, especially early on in the process, when we're still trying to figure this out. And that's the very reason we're doing this, is to figure out what works for us.
Yeah, I learned a lot about who I am as a writer, who I want to be as a writer, and the way I interact with the story that I'm writing, and the way I want to interact with the story that I'm writing. I found the scenes that I went into where I was discovering things for myself are the ones that really felt good writing. And so I'm going to kind of take a new turn on the new thing I'm writing, which is a whole new story with a lot of shared characters. Just in name only mostly, but
You didn't really have final names anyway for your characters.
no,
right?
it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be discovering the city where my main character is located for myself in a lot of the same ways that the reader is going to, at least in the first draft, to kind of give myself the feeling of exploration and excitement in finding new things and new places. And I'm going to kind of experiment with that to see if it results in effective storytelling or if it feels like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't exactly know what that's going to turn out to look like, but I'm excited to kind of take that new tack on it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know it's not, using a first draft, discovery written first draft as an outline is not a new technique by any means, but it's new to us, and we're excited to try it out. And hopefully by us trying it out and sort of letting you guys know how it works for us and what the downsides are, what the upsides are from our perspective, and if maybe you see some similarities with how you've approached stories in the past with us, whether you've had this sort of inherent kind of looking down upon discovery writing attitude like I've had for some reason. I'm not sure why, but that's always been my attitude towards it, I think. I've always kind of looked down on improvisational writing as opposed to plotted writing. And maybe this will be helpful for you to kind of take that new perspective too and give it a try maybe and see if it works, or, find your own hybrid between the two, because that's what it's always going to be, like I said. So, yeah, I'm excited to do it. And do you have any kind of ideas about where you're going to start, John, or how the process is going to look for you, or any ideas about that?
Actually started a little bit already, just a couple paragraphs. The way I'm beginning it is I'm literally just jumping into it, trying to see what that looks like to do. I'm not preparing in advance very much, just kind of the general plot that I want. And then I am even skipping the very beginning of the story because I don't know exactly what I want for that yet. But I know kind of where it's going to go, like 2 chapters in. So I'm starting there. And I'm just going to write and see where the story takes me, and then start filling in pieces as I kind of find where I can put them, and then just kind of see how that all works out.
Yeah, because you're going to find questions in your writing. You're going to think of something on the spot probably while you're in the scene, kind of discovering it, and you're going to sort of come up with a character or a situation, and how did this come about, and where did this person come from, why are they this way? And those questions are probably going to lead you to answering those questions, which is going to lead to other parts of the story, which you can then organize later into a more coherent kind of structural format, I guess, because you still want to, remain, loyal to sort of a traditional-ish story structure, I think, at least. I still value that a lot, kind of that 3-act structure, not necessarily 3 acts, but kind of that traditional sort of hero's journey archetype, or and it's other archetypes too, but I part of why I don't really like, well, I wouldn't say I don't like it. I really do like Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, but there's something about it that doesn't keep me turning the pages, or I guess keeping listening when I'm listening to it on audiobook, the way that something a little more traditional fantasy does, because I think of the structure. He's very much a discovery writer, and it really shows in that series, at least in my opinion. I don't know for sure how he wrote those books, but it really comes off to me. And from what I've heard about it, I think he did very much kind of just discover those books very much as he wrote them. And it kind of comes off that way in terms of the flow and the pacing and stuff, because sometimes it meanders a lot, for at least in my opinion. So I still want to have my stories flow the way that something like Aragon does. I know it's cliche in a lot of ways, but I still love that book, and I love the way it flows.
Yeah.
And it really kept me turning the pages, especially as a teenager, discovering fantasy literature, I guess. And that's kind of what I want to capture in my writing, at least right now. Maybe that'll change at some point. But so I don't want to lose that structure and that flow and that pacing, but I also want to be able to, actually finish a book. So we're going to try to meld those two things together in some way. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, so much of this has and continues to be us experimenting with what we want to do as writers, because, we don't know yet. We're not established in the way we do things. We're not experts by any means. And so we're learning and hopefully helping you guys to learn about yourselves as well, what we want to do when we write. Are you a plotter who needs to have an established plot to get anything done, or are you someone who wants to find things out through your character's eyes? You need to find that out for yourself, and that's the process that we're kind of undergoing right now.
Yeah, totally. And don't, part of what I think we're discovering is don't confine yourself to one process because that's how you want to be able to do things, or that you think that's how you should be able to do things. Kind of let yourself try different methods and see what works for you. And you can still, the whole, a big part of this, or I guess a big part of what we always kind of talk about and kind of tell ourselves is that later on, once the first draft is done, then you can go back and kind of finagle things and reorganize and really nitpick and put the different pieces together differently and cut it apart and split it apart, whatever you want to do. But until you get to that first draft, you don't have anything to work with. So just get there however you can is kind of my mentality at this point. And then, worry about structure and all that kind of stuff from there. Figure out what your story is first. And if, improvising and kind of discovering is part of that process, then great,
Go for it.
Exactly. So I think it's going to be for both of us, it's going to be a lot of jumping around depending on what's kind of, in our mind whenever we sit down. Because I think both of us are taking elements of stories we've had ideas for in the past and kind of incorporating them into this still. We still have a general idea of what we want. I know I do. And I think that's going to lead to, and we both are so inculcated with that traditional structure and kind of how stories typically go, that I think we're going to naturally kind of follow that anyway. Not perfectly, of course, but I think we know that there's going to be a climax. We know there's going to be a middle section. We kind of know what that means.
That's the way we interpret story.
Yeah.
And that's the way we've always seen it. So we're going to gravitate towards that naturally, but that's not to say we can or should exclude things as they come. Like, not every story is told with the same traditional structure.
Yeah, and maybe that'll allow us to be original without even, meaning to be in some ways, more than it would happen if we tried to just say, okay, this is when this is going to happen, and then the next chapter this is going to happen, and that kind of stuff, So, yeah, it could be a really good thing, I think, and I'm excited to try it out.
Yes.
Yeah, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think we're good there. I think in a future episode we can talk about some of the stuff we're thinking about in terms of focusing on characters and the way they experience the story, as opposed to telling a story first and foremost before you consider the characters. Definitely. And how it affects them. But we can touch on it briefly. That's one thing that we both talked about over the course of kind of this winter break that we've had from the podcast, just focusing intensely on the characters and their interpretation of events and the way that it affects them, because that's what readers are going to care about, and ultimately that's what's going to keep you writing as well, because you need to get invested in the stakes and invested in your characters just as much as the reader is going to, or even more so. So that's one thing we've been discussing as well.
Definitely, yeah. You don't want that to ever feel sterile from both either a reading or a writing perspective, because Yeah, I mean, isn't that why we do this in the first place? Is because it's interesting and it's fun and it gets you involved. Just like if you're reading a great book, hopefully you get that involved and invested and immersed in your own writing, and it keeps you going. You know, so and it's been hard for us with that more sterile feeling, at least for us, process that we were trying before. So yeah, that's definitely a big part of it, is kind of knowing who your characters are and discovering who they are, knowing that going in, and then sort of tailoring the story more to that than the other way around, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And I can say that, but it doesn't make it easy to do. Oh, okay, cool. We'll just do that
always,
then. Cool.
As always, easier said than done.
Of course, yeah. And this is all just us trying to figure it out. So come along with us. It's going to be fun, I think. Hopefully.
World Builders Anonymous Season 2.
Season 2, here we go. I guess didn't plan on having seasons, but I guess
that's kind of how it works.
Sure, let's do it. So go back and listen to our other stuff. It's still valid. I think there's still a lot of value there, and for some people it might work great, and it might work a lot better than it did for us. And it wasn't a complete failure by any means. We got a good bit done and learned a lot, and there's a lot of good stuff there. So go back and listen to our other episodes. But this is kind of a new beginning, a new chapter in our journey to try to become authors and finish books and that kind of stuff. So
or die trying.
Exactly. No, we're both doing a lot of other things too. So it's not like it's not like this is what we're depending on or anything. It's mostly still just fun for us, and we would like it to be kind of a job at some point. But for both of us, I think it's just kind of a here, let's figure this out and have fun doing it kind of thing. Yeah.
It's also like a childhood dream kind of deal.
Of course, yeah.
We become authors like the people we grew up reading.
Yeah, and all those stories affected us so much, and we loved them so much, and really shaped in many ways who we are and how we interact with the world, really, because the stories are powerful things, and just because there's magic and dragons in it doesn't mean it's not valuable and can't be meaningful for somebody. So we want to give that to other people while having fun doing it ourselves, and everyone wins. Great.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins. Cool. So yeah, give us some links to where we can find us. That did not work out very well.
I thought you were gonna say give us some money. Like, I don't know why that's what my brain went to.
We're not opposed to that either, but that's not what I was gonna say.
Yes.
Where can the good people find us on the social medias and interwebs, John?
It's been a while since I said this, so bear with me.
We're going to figure this out.
You can email us at wbapodcast@gmail.com with your questions, comments, or criticisms. You can find us on Instagram at WBA_podcast. You can find us on Instagram at World Builders Anonymous, I think, and also find us on YouTube and Spotify under the same name.
Indeed.
And I think I hit everything that's relevant.
Well, actually, I think I wanted to say, too, we've not been plugging the iTunes reviews as much as we should.
Right.
Any good podcast needs to plug iTunes reviews, because that is one of the most important things for any podcast. I know it's a real pain in the butt. I know I had to figure out how to do it over like half an hour, but it's actually not too hard. If you look up, kind of Google how to leave an iTunes review for a podcast, it's actually a pretty simple process, but it takes some looking up for some reason.
And the nice thing is that if you are listening to this episode, at least 1 week after it was originally posted, there's another episode after this, so you can play that episode while you figure out how to leave a review.
Exactly.
It's like a pro tip right there.
At least if you're good at multitasking and can pay attention to two things at once. I know everyone's not great at that.
Do it.
But I have faith in you. Go ahead and listen to the other one.
You could do it.
You could do it. Anyway, yes, those help us out a lot. So leave an iTunes review if you like the podcast. If you don't like the podcast, just keep it to yourself.
Or leave a review anyway, because we're cute.
Oh yeah, that's too. That's good too.
And we're adorable.
And we're adorable. Yes. Anyway, going off the rails here. Anyway,
all right.
It looks like it's about that time.
Oh, geez. Oh, that's disgusting.
Okay, there we go.
That did not come well through an audio.
Well, might cut it out. You never know. If it works out good.
I doubt it.
I am in control of this audio. I dictate what ends up in the podcast.
I can do whatever I want.
Exactly. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Stay tuned next week for another episode, and we will see you then.
See you then.
Cool.
This show is sponsored in part by Audible. Visit worldbuildersanonymous.com/audible to check out what the guys are listening to right now and to receive a free audiobook.